Thanks everyone for joining us. We are delighted to have all of you participating to this session. One of the goals of this session is to share from previous experience of working together with an academic, of having a match that was done and that seems to have been relatively successful. So let me just have a brief introduction where I put things in context of why we have this session and how this relates to the effort that we have to organize a matchmaking event from 19th to 21st of July in Nairobi. So could you pass to the next session, please? Next slide. Okay. So as you know, in many of you know, since 2021, SPIA offered to all the initiatives to support them in the development of their impact assessments. But not everyone is actually working with SPIA now. There is a total of 15 initiatives that are actively engaged with SPIA to think about what their impact assessment could look like, to work together on a design, to eventually help finding who can help, or having some meetings together in any kind of way. SPIA is trying to support their impact assessment. That's probably what was expected, in the sense that some initiatives are more proactive than others in first thinking and designing their impact assessments from no one, and others have been pushing this forward a little bit more. Some need more help than other, and are looking for more support, technical support than others. So that's great, but we hope that everyone would be, in the longer term, everyone would engage with SPIA, and we see part of our role as really supporting all these impact assessment initiatives. You may find other sources of support. You certainly already have a fair amount of skills in many places to run your impact assessments, but SPIA is also here to support with having the skills. And one of the ways we think can be helpful is, so many places would benefit from an academic matchmaking. Oops. Yeah. Many places would benefit from an academics matchmaking. I have to admit people, because it shows up on my screen all the time, the people who show up. But so many people would benefit from this matchmaking we think for two reasons. One is the technical support that it brings to have some academic, which we try to look for experts in impact assessments, and hence they have a fair amount of experience running some good impact assessments, and they have published this way, and they have a good credibility in the kind of results that they have, that could add to the experience that people already have within the initiatives within the CG. And second is there's always a good gain in credibility from having an external academics that really helps people believe that it's not just that people want to show that their innovation is great, and they may be biased in some way. The fact that you have some researchers from outside that contribute to this is certainly adds to the credibility of and the perception, at least, of objectivity from outside. So if we could pass to the next slide, please. So this matchmaking event will happen in July, as I said, from the 19th to 21st. That's the first event. We hope that there will be more events in the future, conditional on this one going well and then getting more participation. These are typically those that have somewhat the most advanced concrete impact assessment plans and want to participate. These initiatives include the sapling, the plant health, climber, Nexus Plus, market intelligence, and seed equal. They all share their impact assessment plans. We've had some exchange already on these plans. And we can also, if you want, spend a little bit of time on discussing what's most useful in these impact assessment plans. I think we can still make progress in really trying to be very concrete, very down to earth in terms of typically an initiative is very complex. It includes many components, but an impact assessment would focus on some elements, either that you want to know what is the impact of these elements, or you want to learn a learning study that helps you know what makes it work better or not. And it's very useful to arrive to these matchmaking events with concrete ideas on what are the interventions, what intervention could be scaled within a relatively short term, could be scaled up, could be assessed. You think you have good partners that help you, that would sort of cooperate if you want to say, here we could have some treatments, here we could have some controls, and we have enough control on who, we have enough places that can be treated or not, and enough control on sort of having a partner that would help decide where it would be or not treated. That's it. And so all these summaries have helped a lot identify the group of potential external researchers. We shared it with the researchers, and we looked for researchers that could be diverse, interested in the various topics that are in the initiatives. Part of the logic is really many researchers are sort of involved in too many studies, but they also have PhD students, and they like to have one PhD student that sort of takes the lead in sort of the daily work that's related to the impact assessment. But as their advisor and as co-researchers, they would be involved in leading the study with a PhD student that would help with this. In not all cases, but in about half of the cases, that's sort of the design. You will see in the matchmaking student, the PhD students that are there, and the researchers that either go with the PhD student or would be remotely connected in some cases. But that's a good way to get involved researchers that are good, well-known, but not necessarily have the time to go spend a week, travel and participate to a matchmaking event. So now the discussions will focus on the 6 initiatives that are invited on trying to help them make progress in their impact assessment, and eventually, if things go well, having a match with some academics and continue the work together way after the impact assessments. But everyone is welcome to join virtually. We've had so many questions about, but how advanced are the other initiatives? Are they doing well? Do they already have an impact assessment well designed and all this? So it's a good occasion to see how advanced are some of your colleagues in that point, and getting some examples of how it could work in case someone wants to participate to all of the event or some of the event virtually at least. I think it would be a good way of exchanging and learning from each other. And so we know that many already have experience with either matchmaking or with working with external academics, but then without that, having a very concrete examples of how one match that was done relatively recently that is still ongoing. We don't have the final conclusions of this. How does it work? What are the caveats? What's useful to make it advance? Without that, all this would be very useful. So so that's what we're sharing now. That's the goal of this session, also to share this experience. And so I won't take more time. Yes, there are questions that I could be useful at answering, but otherwise, let's jump to the presentation.
Thank you, Rashid. So we want to invite the Excellence in Agronomy colleagues that will share their experience in doing this matchmaking. So Aminou, the first use.
Okay, thank you. Let me share my screen. Okay, thank you. I hope you can see my screen. And thank again for SPIA to inviting the Excellence in Agronomy to share the experience that we have so far in terms of matchmaking with Advanced Research Institute for impact assessment. So I will be mainly focused on the case of Tufts University, and talk also a little bit about Wageningen University and Research. So my talk will be around 5 points. First, I will try to present the overview of the MELIA activity in excellency in agronomy, and then talk a little bit how we start with this matchmaking experience, the role and responsibility of excellence in agronomy and also other partners in this matchmaking, and then talk a little bit about some advantage and challenges that we have seen so far and the lesson learned for the future matchmaking for impact assessment. So in excellence in agronomy, the way we design our MELIA framework, first we start, of course, from the research question that are derived from the theory of change, and that is also in connection with the results framework. So this monitoring evaluation framework, we divided into two. The first component is about monitoring, evaluation, and learning, and this is mainly regarding to monitoring and evaluation in general, where we are trying, to document, to report the progress on the initiative, both in terms of input and output, and also to use that to take some stage gating and course of correction decision. And this monitoring and evaluation learning component will also, of course, help to track the activity, which will be basically a basis for panel survey, but also for the impact assessment in the long run. So this leads us to the second component of the MELIA activities in excellence in agronomy, which is basically related to the impact assessment. There we have, let's say, three categories of activity that we plan. First, we plan to do RCT to address some key research questions. In agronomy, we know that the adoption of agronomy solution is always reporting to be low. So one of key questions we want to address in the RCT is to see how we can incorporate some incentive or some bundling in order to be able to increase the uptake of agronomic solution. And also, we know that in terms of gender, because youth and women are usually constrained, are usually resource constrained, then we also want to try some gender transformative delivery approach, again, to be able to increase the uptake of the innovation by youth and also the women. Of course, the RCT will also help to try to assess some causal impact of the agronomic solution on KPI, what is mainly a key performance indicator. This is very important to come back a little bit to the first part of the RCT, when we are talking about a research question regarding on how to increase the uptake of innovation. I can say that this approach is quite new in terms of RCT. Mainly the RCT in general, they are trying to address the second part, which is the causal impact, but try to see how the RCT can help to, or how to design the bundling or packaging of innovation to increase the adoption. This is not usually common in the RCT. And that is where also we are thinking that it is very important to have a kind of matchmaking, exchange knowledge, work with academic, other partners in order to do that in a very robust way. So the second aspect in our impact assessment is also related to the panel survey, which we want to use for long-term and large-scale exposed impact assessment. We think that also that we may need to have also some matchmaking to be able to do it very well. And the last point is also regarding to the qualitative outcome study. I think last year when SPIA was engaging the different initiatives, there were questions on how also to move some study regarding the qualitative outcome study, because most of the studies are more quantitative. And there we believe also that we can work on matchmaking in order to address those aspects as much as possible. And that you can see what justify our engagement with advanced research institutes, universities, in order to be able to work together. So in terms of history, as Rashidi mentioned, the team, the IDT, Initiative Development Team of the Excellence in Agronomy, they joined in 2021. In June 2021, the webinar that was organized by the SPIA. And during this webinar, of course, SPIA encouraged the initiative to settle a team in order to design robust MELIA. And Excellence in Agronomy has done that. So we have a team of people only in charge of MELIA in Excellence in Agronomy. So during the development of the proposal, we developed the MELIA plan, and this MELIA plan was submitted to SPIA for their review. So we work on it. There were a number of going forward, backwards, until we get a number of we get a plan that we think is quite robust. So after that, we now ask the SPIA that, okay, based on this plan, if it is possible to have, to suggest to us some potential research and academia that can work with us on this MELIA plan. So Jenny Acker from Tufts University was suggested to the initiatives. And after a number of exchange and also documentation, we see that Jenny has quite a substantial experience in design and also implementing a randomized controlled trial, and also in sub-Saharan Africa. So then we get in touch with her. We have a number of discussions, and we see that she was really experienced in learning-oriented impact assessment, as I mentioned before. So based on that, we developed a role of responsibility of each part, which you can see on this slide. In this role and responsibility along the studies, so basically we agree that the design of experimental will be done, it will be a co-design between the two parties. But when we come to the tool design, for the tool design, it will be led by Tufts University, and the field implementation will be led by Excellence in Agronomy, the MELIA team. Now, to also give more credibility, the data analysis and publication will be led by Tufts University. So that is the way we try to arrange this role and responsibility of each party. In terms of discussion we have with them, we have also a discussion with Wageningen University. The story was almost the same, because with Wageningen University, we also start discussions since last year. But here, we want really to use the experience of Wageningen University in terms of qualitative studies, and also their experience in conducting scaling readiness. So we know that they have participated with the CGIAR in developing the scaling readiness approach. So that is why we also approached them. And we had initiative discussion with the lead person, which is Lewis. And we agreed that we are going to have a PhD student who will be working also on that. So with Wageningen University again, we developed also the role and responsibility, which is almost close to what I presented before for Tufts University. basically the idea there is still, again, the design will be done together, but the tool development will be done by Wageningen University. The field data collection will be supervised by Excellence in Agronomy, but the Wageningen University and Research will lead the data analysis and reporting. So far, what are the advantages and challenges that we see? To be honest, we are just at the beginning. So it's just, I can say it is updates in terms of advantage and challenges. So it's not, because the experience is not long yet, so we cannot say all the advantage or challenges. But in terms of advantages, we know that the Advanced University and Research Institute, that they have quite experience in what where we want to work with them. And usually they have also the advantage of incorporating good theoretical background, and it's helped also to have a quality publication peer review in future, of course, not now, but we expect that. And it's also helped to link with other experts within the region or the country, because those Advanced Research Institute, they have also good partner in the countries where we are working, and we can also leverage on them. It is also possible from the RE to dedicate also special person in order to make the matchmaking successful. And finally, in terms of advantage, I think we can say that in past, we have had very good experience with Advanced University. Personally, I have experience with Illinois University, Arizona University, and we also have ongoing experience with Sydney University, Northwestern University, and California University. So with all these advanced university, I think personally, I have very good experience and very good, advantage from this collaboration that we have. In terms of challenges, it's not really specific to RE in general. It could also be linked to partnership in general. So the modality of collaboration sometimes is slow. The second part, in terms of challenges, it may be related to the availability of the partners, of the RE partners, especially if they are already engaged in other projects. And finally, in terms of challenge also, for instance, in the initiative now, we have only 1 year budget which has been approved. But to commit, for instance, for a PhD student, we need to go beyond 1 year, because any RE will not agree to sign a contract with us based on 1 year of fund. So I think that is a challenge that we have seen also. In terms of lesson learned of how we can move ahead, I think what we are proposing is that it is good. I think matchmaking is good, but we should not say that the matchmaking will replace the impact assessment team or the MELIA team within the initiative. I think I still believe that within the initiative, we still need to have the MELIA expertise. And now that will be complemented by the matchmaking with RE. Otherwise, it may be a little bit challenging. It's also important in terms of future engagement to start early. I think we have already done that. If there are initiatives that are not yet there, I think it is good to start. Another point for future consideration is that also within the RE, at least the university that will be in partnership, it is good to have at least one staff which will be dedicated also to the initiative activities. As I mentioned before, it is also important to consider the availability of the RE partners. Of course, it's linked to what I mentioned before, because they are also they are engaging in many projects. It's not only our initiative, but in other projects. So it's very important to take into account their availability. And finally, I think it's good to continue to work with SPIA to identify the best fit advanced research institute and university for the, and also based on the impact assessment topic, because it depends on the research question that you want to address. And finally, I think it will be good if, because till now, the process of selecting the RE is not competitive. So it will be good in future if we can make that more, you know, kind of more competitive process. It may help to choose not only best, but also to take into account other criteria, including the availability. So that is what the team of the MELIA in Excellence in Agronomy prepare, and they asked me to share it with you. Thank you.
Thanks, Aminou. Could you stop sharing?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank
Rashid?
you.
Thank you very much, Aminou. Thank you for the presentation. I think it's super useful. And I think you said something very important also in the idea that the idea is definitely not that the academic research partner replaces the local, the CG experts, CG researchers. It is really an idea of complementarity. And I think that's why it's a matchmaking. It's not a subcontracting and then letting out the impact assessment, as much as the sort of the external point of view is useful both for bringing in expertise and for bringing this sort of an external assessment is always considered more independent than an internal assessment. There is also a lot of reasons for having internal capacity in impact assessment. Those who are working in the initiatives, are much more informed, much more directly connected with those that are implementing the interventions, have a long-term history of engagement with those who who make the intervention. And hence, all of this is crucial for sort of setting up a good impact assessment. And we really think of this as one downside sometimes is thinking of a cooperation just as, well, tell you what to do and that's it, and you implement this and there is no learning. We really think and hope that in all of these experience there is a shared learning from clearly the academic researchers have a lot to learn as well about how the CG work, how to set up interventions together, etc. And the CG researchers also have a lot to learn, and typically these are people with relatively high level publications, level in the sense that they are well published, but also that they bring credibility and they're well cited and they help having an influence on future studies and future practices and interventions. So there is obviously a potential learning here in how to implement such studies. I agree it can be frustrating. Sometimes it's a longer scale. It's sort of taking a bit more time from the implementation to the analysis, to the writing, to the publication process. But it kind of pays off also in getting more influence also of the potential study if things go well. And so it's really not replacing, it's really building up, and the idea is that one match today, because it strengthens the capacity within the CG and it helps other researchers know the CG, know how to work with the CG. Each study that we have helps building up and having more and better studies in impact assessments in the future. That's really part of the goal of what we have here. I've seen that there are questions in the chat on topics such as the funding. I think the funding is always a source of worry for lots of people. We've had the same questions also from the academics on does the match mean that there is funding guaranteed? We come if there is a project, we have the funding. We have to be frank on this, that there is the match SPIA in this case does not bring any funding together with the match. typically the academics either some have some kind of flexible funding, but it is usually not the case, so you should not really count on this. So on one aspect, many initiatives are supposed to dedicate some of their funding to the impact assessment. So we hope that this is happening to some extent. And usually because these are relatively good, strong researchers working together with the team, we think that helps applying together and having more chances of reaching external funding for impact assessments. But SPIA is not providing funding condition, thinking, okay, if we have a match, we'll have funding. That would not be the case in general. It's you will have to look for funding in most of the cases and hopefully get fundings from the initiatives. There was one additional point that was I wanted to raise, but let's receive comments and reactions now. I'm sure it will come back to me soon. Oh, meanwhile, okay, it came back to me. The availability of the academic researchers is definitely a constraint, and I think when we think of a sort of trying to bring some superstars of impact assessments and some younger academics, usually there is a bit of a trade-off here, because superstars also mean people with tons of projects and less time and being able to spend in a given project. So to the best of our capacity, knowledge, connections, with the involvement of the SPIA panel, we're looking for people that we think are people that are good at what they do, and also there are people who tend to have a real involvement in being in the project, trying to go to the field, trying to learn about what's happening, and not some people that are just, okay, let's set up an RCT, what can we randomize, let's do this. And we really want people who are interested in understanding what's happening and in finding out together with the team what is the most interesting thing to study, to work on together there, and hopefully to reach a common interest. Sometimes there's a dilemma between what the academics want to study and what the implementers, the CG are interested in. Hopefully there is usually a good overlap to start with, but sometimes you do have to find the right compromise for something that is academically interesting, but also interesting for the CG in overall.
There is a question for Aminou about how long did it take for the examines in agronomy to fix the matchmaking. Aminou, would you like to take that question?
Yes. So I think it is a good question, but I cannot really be able to estimate the time and say, okay, it is this period, because of course it's an ongoing process. But we start, at least because we start the linking during the proposal development. Okay, so that is where we start the linking. So let's say around October last year, and then we have the principle, and then this year when the fund were allocated to excellence in agronomy and other initiatives, that is where we recontact back the Tufts University and also Wageningen University, and then start working with them. But I can say that for those initiatives that's already active, and if they don't have this type of matchmaking now, I can say normally within 1 month, you can get to the principle. SPIA can help to identify and then have some connection and be able to really start. I think it should not be too long to do that. So when are we going to conduct our baseline? We are in the process now. Depend on the country, but definitely we plan that from now to end of August, we should be able to conduct our baseline. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, back to you, Ricardo.
Thank you, Aminou. I think Marcel also have another question here in the chat. Marcel, maybe you can just speak and let us know your question directly.
Hi everyone. I try to be as accurate as possible in the chat. All right. No, yeah, thanks for that. So I mean, we all know, or we have engaged with SPIA for quite some time, and we also know, you know, what type of research SPIA is clearly, you know, looking for, and as an economist, you know, I can reflect that. But now my role in the initiative has also changed, right? So I'm not anymore an agriculture economist only. I have also different hats. So I'm kind of responsible now for the broader impact assessment of the entire initiatives. And while we have for InSeed-Equal, and while we have collecting ideas for this initiative, there's a lot of different, you know, disciplines involved now. And the ideas are not strictly only quantitative ideas, so, you know, very rigorous research designs and RCTs and whatnot, but clearly also point more to you know, to hopefully allow for methods that are more qualitative in character. So I was wondering, you know, what it is that SPIA wants us to connect with, you know, what type of universities these are, what the disciplines are. Is it strictly only economics, or is it more broad? Is it socioeconomics? Will we be matched with maybe even anthropologists or other social scientists to help us also maybe to, you know, to do research, which is in that sense, in brackets, more qualitative. Thanks.
Hi, Marcel. Thanks a lot for this question. I think it's great. It gives us the opportunity to mention one thing that we're working on. We're together with Monica for this matchmaking event, which is to bring some experts. It's one area of all the qualitative things that can be done, but we are working on bringing some expert in sort of policy influence. At least one of the messages in terms of that we got from the CG is situations where people say, we think this had a huge impact, but it is not something that can be evaluated through an impact assessment. What kind of impact? We generated some lessons. We think these lessons were integrated in the government policy, and that changed something that was done at a substantially larger level than some kind of project that you can randomize where the project would happen. So this is an area where it could be called qualitative. There are different ways of thinking about this, from sort of tracing the evidence of a research that was produced. Sometimes the same language was reused in policy reports, and from there you could see relatively clearly that this translated into policies from the government and other large-scale implementers. That is one specific channels where we hope we can learn all together. To be frank, in SPIA, we would mostly consider that we don't directly have this expertise, but we hope to bring in researchers that do, and so that we can all learn together. The SPIA panel, some of the when we can share the schedule, we want to confirm first that we have the sort of the right people for these lessons. If it's not in this matchmaking, we'll definitely try to bring in some of this kind of expertise. We think that hopefully fits into this category of qualitative, not necessarily impact assessment kind of evidence, but still very important set of evidence on the kind of activities that the CG may have. Kyle, you may want to complete this.
Yeah, I wouldn't say complete, but just you know, maybe add to that. I agree with what Rashid said. I think there's also room for complementarities in these impact evaluation designs between qualitative research and quantitative research. In some cases, qualitative research can be set up to maybe inform the design of an RCT or a study that is part of one of these impact assessment plans, or qualitative research may be sort of built into the design to tell us why, you know, why treatment A is working better than treatment B, for instance. And so, you know, I think in those cases where the initiatives are interested in learning those things, which I think are very important to learn, then, you know, we can look for, I don't want to put Monica too much on the spot, but Monica can help us, I should say, look for qualitative researchers who maybe come from other disciplines, whether it be sociology or something along those lines, who might be good matches in that case. So I think there's an opportunity for that, but it's kind of, you know, the initiatives, it's up to the initiatives to sort of point to those needs.
Yeah, if I may come in, I think Marcel touched a very important point regarding the qualitative impact assessment, which is a very important. I agree with what Rashidi said also. In excellence in agronomy, of course, the way it is designed, there is very heavy aspects on partnership. So the whole methodology had changed, and there is a new process, a new due diligence, a stage gate approach. While when an innovation or a partner does not meet a certain criteria, it's not going to go to another stage. So all this process, definitely we cannot quantify. Okay, and it's a new approach, and we think that it will be good to test, to evaluate, and also to see how this approach works or not. And for that, we think that this process, of course, is something that we need expertise to be able to work on qualitative aspects. So that is why we are bringing in the Wageningen University to work with us on that. So I think this is a very important point. As Rashidi mentioned, there may be many different aspects where we really see that everything will not be quantitative, but at least we can do some qualitative, or maybe some quali and quanti mix is also possible. So I think that is a very important aspect that we need to take into account. Thank you.
Should
I follow? I see that another hand is raised, but I'm not sure from whom. Yeah, and the other comment also, so I fully agree with the previous comments. The other thing is, I think being sort of responsible of the impact assessment of a whole initiative should probably not be interpreted as you have to provide impact assessment for everything that the initiative does, because that sounds impossible. I think there is a need to focus on to question where are the priorities, what is sort of the team in the initiative most interested in, and second, what is feasible, right? You think of these two criteria, try to prioritize what you think are the most interesting, either sort of a high potential things that you want to evidence, because if you think this is the highest potential and you can show that it works well, that can help collect more funding, that can help multiply this intervention and replicate it in larger scale, if it works well, if that could be evidenced. And in any case, if it doesn't work, it's useful to know that something that you thought works great does not work that great. So it's good to have this sort of mindset that maybe it will work, maybe it won't, and any of these lessons is interesting as well. And the second thing is, where do you want to learn the most? You really think there are different ways of doing it, and it's the most helpful to know what makes it work or not. These are some of the key questions of what makes it most interesting. And then by now, most of you know that in an RCT, you need to have sufficient clusters, sort of places where it will be implemented. You need to have some controls. You need to have good connection with the partners that are implementing it. What kind of design, what kind of intervention within the initiative seems to fit with these criteria? So I encourage those that go to the matchmaking to sort of do as much as possible the initial work, because these are typically the questions that the academics will ask. So really try to do this task of thinking what pieces of the initiative best fit into this. Maybe that means one impact assessment come out of it, maybe two, maybe more than this, but it's not going to be the entire initiative. And typically there's something where even if you were able to assess the whole initiative in terms of lessons learned, it's complicated because it's such a huge package that it doesn't really tell you what works within this or not. So in terms of lessons for applications, it's sometimes best to have some key elements of this being in an impact assessment. So perhaps don't put too much burden on your shoulders thinking that you have to make the impact, to assess everything that the initiative is doing.
Thanks, Ronnie. There is a question from Isabel for you, Aminou. Is how was your research design and change after discussion with the university?
I think it's mainly based on the research question. That is where we are working together. It still continue. We are continue the discussion. But as I mentioned, for us, it is really how the design is a co-construction. Because as I mentioned before, our idea here is to design a new type of RCT. It's not really the causal aspect of the RCT that is interested to us. It's really to be able to see how we can complement, how we can better design the agronomic solution in terms of bundling, in terms of use case, to get them adopted. So I think that is where really we are working together, and it has been improved with the intervention of the ARIS. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Mino. I saw some comments from Frank Place. Maybe Frank, you want to come in and explain what is already in the system, where we can learn from?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. Yeah, I just switched to my headphones so that I was just listening with my computer. Yeah. Anyway, I'm happy to maybe I can work with Monica on the policy influence part, because at least I have a history. I don't know if I have all the right answers, but at least I know of a lot of things that have been done around policy influence previously and within PIM also. So anyway, I'm happy to contribute to provide some information that at least I'm aware of on the policy influence aspects. Yeah, there's been a number of different kinds of methodologies used by different centers and CRPs over the last few years. So yeah, and we can explore also with people who have a lot of good expertise, like John Main and others who have been helping and working with the CG and things like that. So anyway, I'm happy to help connect Monica or others to information sources that I have.
Thanks, Frank. Any other question or comment?
Yeah, I saw Isabel's question, and also I think the question is whether the match were already made based on what was in the impact assessment in terms of this is what the in sort of the plans for impact assessment. I would say that first the match are more broadly, so we contacted academics and we said there is this matchmaking event where there are these 6 initiatives, and without you may be particularly interested in this initiative, so that's why we contacted you. But the idea of a matchmaking event is that we don't make the match ex ante. So we try to sort of one, to interest them, and two, to have some balance of people interested in the different topics, have this first pre-selection. But one, I think they more broadly pick, this topic is interested to me in general, so that's one reason for me to go. They don't have to, they are not tied to, okay, there is this in the impact assessment exactly. In general, it's still way too broad for them to say, I'm interested because I want to have to make this impact assessment. It's the topic that interests them and their PhD students when the PhD student will join as well. And two, it's the logic is we don't match until everyone speaks together. How will the matchmaking event be organized? First, you, the initiatives, the 6 initiatives, will first present, this is the project, this is the initiative that we have, this is where we see some potential for impact assessment. Everyone will present. and then there is an initial feedback all together, everyone in the same room, that can be given to each one of the initiatives just after they present. And then we start going into smaller groups of common interest. And then we go to even smaller group of typically one initiative and 1 or 2 academics or academic teams, so that you can discuss now your plans. But think of it as the speed dating also, kind of, you try to talk to different people so that you find who is your good match. And that's why first everyone presents their work, and based on this, people sort of suggest who they want to be matched to, and make the matches. We hope that works well, but that's the logic in general. So you don't feel too tied to being with one person before it comes, and or this is what we suggested as impact assessment, so this is what it has to be. I see that Isabel raised her hand.
Yeah, here I'm a bit confused, because as initiative leads, we have already identified the impact assessment topics, and they were not done randomly. It was actually quite a bit discussion. So of course, how do you say? We have the topic is still quite broad, although some of us have specific design already in mind. But I don't expect that we will focus on, we will agree on a different topic within the initiatives. I would hope that we will stay close to the overall topic that we have put in the proposal. Otherwise, that may change quite a bit of the rest of the initiative. So that's where I'm trying to say. And this is why I was asking Aminou about how much of the design he had to adjust, because obviously if it's matchmaking, you have to, we have to agree. Both sides have to be flexible, obviously. That I fully understand, but I wouldn't expect that we change the topic based on that matchmaking. That's like in a speed dating, right? You still remain yourself. You just have to find the right partner. But is that what you're understanding, or I've missed something? Thank you.
Yeah, in the speed dating, you don't have to change who you are to please the other. Otherwise, it doesn't work in the long term. No, okay, we have to take into account that there's a whole spread of how much each one is advanced in the design that they have. Some are have something very concrete in mind, and some much less. And that's reflected also in the text that we shared with the academics. And I guess that's taken into account. Some would have a preference for something that has more chances of working because you already made progress in this, and others may have preference for something where there's still more to be decided. So that's also part of what also makes the matches. I think everyone will be respectful of the fact that you have advanced more, you have worked on this. It's great that some have made more progress, and there, I don't think there is a contradiction in. We need to be flexible. If you already have a good design and you're happy about this, probably, hopefully, the person that comes can bring more. The academics that come can help bring more inputs and adjustments to this. It's completely open whether that's if things seem to work well. Great, let's go with this. If there's more comments and feedback that you also find constructive, in any case, there is no obligation, right? You will meet with some people if you find that there is some value added in working together, that can work. If you find that it requires too much compromise in changing what you already have, then that doesn't work. So I think it's completely fine. I think we have to keep it flexible on both sides. Theresa?
Yeah, just to add to what you have said, our experience from EiA actually is to concentrate on those IA topics or the areas that we had identified during the proposal. And then the initial plan, IA plan, was designed based on that. The interesting thing having the ARIs there is really, for instance, if you take the qualitative, after sharing our design and the ideas with them, the comments and the questions that really came in were very constructive. Some of the methodologies that we put, they went ahead to propose. For instance, they indicated that, well, if we really want to assess the efficiency and then the effectiveness of a particular model that EiA is using, which is the use case model, and also to see the behavioral change, why don't we sit back and do a sort of theory of change, impact pathway of what change we want to see together with our partners. And as Aminou said, it's a broad-based partnership. So in their case, for instance, this was very constructive, and this is changing a bit of the initial proposed methodology. So it's all, I don't think it's for us to go outside the initial topics that we had discussed, because this took us more than a year to come into conclusion, and some of us, we have our plans. So it's more of sharing with them, getting their views, and the outside views have been very useful to reshape the study that we want to conduct with them. Yeah. Yeah, Rashid, back to you. Thanks.
Yeah, I mostly agree in the sense that you put some work, a lot of work on this, and you tend to have your designs. And as I said, there is still some heterogeneity in the level of advance of the different groups, at least from what we have seen. But most of those that were selected were actually selected because they already had made good progress. And hence, perhaps you don't want to have some people coming in when you have no idea of what you're doing. Hopefully, it's still a good moment to get feedback, to get, sometimes the experience help anticipate some of the obstacles that maybe you would not have foreseen in terms of making sure that you have enough power, making sure that the intervention can go well, that useful lessons can be drawn out of this. And if you find that these kind of feedback help you think, okay, there are some changes that we need to do, because this useful feedback helps us figure out that some things need to be done differently, that's great. There is, in the sense that there is no obligation. You receive this retroalimentation, this feedback, and that helps you think of whether changes need to be done or not. There is no intention to tell people you have to rethink everything. It will be up to every researcher to think of to first. The idea is first to have the academics listen, not to come and say, that's what you're doing, why don't we do this? Obviously, in that sense, I think we all agree. And then after listening, one can provide appropriate feedback to all this. One scenario is you benefit a lot from the feedback that you get from talking to different academics. It's a good moment to make further progress, for you to dedicate a few days of thinking almost only about the impact assessment during these few days, and to get useful feedback during this time. And maybe you don't get any match because no one wants to do exactly the study that you're doing, but even if you don't get a match and you got good feedback, we think that would be a very a good outcome of the matchmaking event. Even in that case, it's good. I think we're all fine with all this. I don't see much contradiction with what we have in mind.
Actually, there is another question from Bellew on academics are based on developing regions are considered for these RE partnerships.
And there was also a question from Marcel in the chat that I didn't understand very well. And Ricardo, you said, sorry, what is the other question?
Are academics and their PhD students based in developing regions considered for RE partnership?
We try to have a mix. We try to include, so typically, so we really try to include academics that have a developing background even if now they are being in UK or in US in some of them. Let us share very soon the profiles of the academics, but it's people who tend to have a foot on the ground and try to be understanding of this kind of backgrounds for the study. There are more questions. Belly, you.
Yeah, maybe just a follow-up on my previous question. So I wanted to share maybe one case in point focusing on Africa. We have the AERC, and they do have a collaborative, PhD program that students from across, sub-Saharan Africa attend. And I know some of the content also focuses on impact evaluation. So if you are considering maybe at least for Africa, that could be one option to explore to find out, good potential partners you could work with. And also the initiatives, capacity building is one of the goals. And already there is a lot of effort to get, national partners involved in a meaningful way, including universities. So this could be another, let's say, goal to achieve as part of the matchmaking. Thanks.
Okay, but you could you send us a link or something that helps us identify better who you're talking about, so that we sort of have them on our list of potential contacts for this kind of event? Well, I'm afraid we're pretty much closing the list. We're in the stage of sort of buying tickets now for those that are invited. So I'm not sure that would be feasible for this event, but we're definitely looking for more academics and more local ones, and this kind of both capacity building and bringing capacity in that sense. So it would be great if you could share the contacts.
I will. Thanks.
Another question from Isabel: is JPAL part of the ARIS?
Sorry, is JPAL?
Yes, part of the academic partners that we're bringing.
Some of them are JPAL academic partners, with the idea that that's it's ideal because it's people that, one, if they're in JPAL, it's for a good reason. They have a good impact assessment experience. And two, obviously it helps applying to other sources of funding. So we can double check who exactly is in the JPAL group within the ones that we contacted.
Another question from Marcel is how many academic universities we're bringing? Because we have 6 initiatives, but how many academic groups we're bringing?
We wanted to get at least 6, and I think at the end we are 7 or 8 to have a good. Hopefully, when we do the match, obviously it's a question of preferences, but hopefully then there is, when we split, we can always have at least one academic team with each initiative. That's the goal. Thank you, everyone. Thanks a lot for participating. And we definitely keep in touch if there are more questions, always trying to answer these questions and settle the doubts. That's the best way, so that everyone can go prepared also for the matchmaking event. And let us reiterate that even those that are not within the 6 initiatives are welcome to join virtually, participate, learn from what the others are doing, and ask their questions. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Aminou.